Hey, welcome back. I just want to dedicate this short episode on the reiteration as to why people should start considering allocating small amounts of the portfolio into Bitcoin now more than ever before, particularly given the fact that we are seeing or have been seeing significant rallies in the price action in Bitcoin, particularly in the last 7 to 10 days, and why that we should really start investing in this leading digital asset, particularly as we are coming close to the end of the US president election, because as we all know, in the US, that's where the major capital markets reside. So what happens over the pond should be followed with great attention. So I'll jump straight into details to what these events are, which triggered this rally, and why people should certainly start considering now as a matter of urgency, allocating small amounts to Bitcoin. Okay, well, one of the reasons why we're seeing this major rally that we're seeing in the last 7 to 10 days is given the fact that the global Bitcoin spot ETFs have seen a major inflows, the biggest 7 day rally since July. And it's amassed an inflow of just over 26,000 Bitcoins, which equates to almost $2 billion worth of net new inflows into the US spot Bitcoin ETFs in the past 7 days. That is significant, right? And adds further price action pressure into the price of Bitcoin. And it goes on to say here that has surged by 15% since October 10 and is just 8% shy away from its all-time high on $73,000 in March. Now we are hovering around 68.5. So I expect that between now and as we approach the end of the US president election, to actually beat the all-time high. It could happen in the remaining 2 weeks of presidential election campaigning at the moment. And then based on the outcome of the elections, US, we can then see where, the actual definitive price action from that moment on. There are bookies out there that are saying that if President Trump were to win the presidential election, can certainly have a sharper increase in comparison to if Kamala Harris wins the presidential election, which would be less, right? In either case, whoever wins, it's inevitable that there is going to be that skyrocket increase in the price of Bitcoin, regardless of whoever wins in the US presidential election. So that's the explanation as to why we are seeing significant price increase. It's to do with this net new inflows into the US spot Bitcoin ETFs. So that is great news. And if you look into this other table here, if you go far back, October 11th, that's where really it began the positive net new inflows. Back then it was 250 million across the 11 US spot Bitcoin ETFs. And ever since then, if you go all the way till the 18th, which is Friday, it's not just $1.75 billion, actually it's $2 billion, right? And as I said before, it wouldn't be at all surprised if we're going to continue on with this inevitable streak rather than lucky streak, because there's going to be continuing net new inflow money moving forward. And this is even more so if you go to the fact that there are many major central banks there who have already begun their journey into this cheap money era where they are continually revising down their interest rates. So this was actually kicked off by the US Federal Reserve, where they've actually led on their September FOMC meeting, the 50% basis points drop, and their expectations for the next meeting, which is going to happen in November 7th. I suspect another 25 basis points, and perhaps leading up to Christmas and December meeting, a further 25 basis point drop. So we're looking about another half percentage point drop between now and end of the year. The European Central Bank, as other major banks, you can see they've already begun their cheap money journey as well. You can take it from this table. We are now living in an era of cheap money. There are going to be a continual small subsequent rate cuts happening over the next 6 to 12 months. And whenever there is cheap money out there, there is a propensity for people to invest in more harder assets. And as we all know, the only major hard asset out there in the world is Bitcoin, right? It has a finite supply of 21 million Bitcoin in the network. It's currently hovering around 19.5 million. That's already been mined, and that's what's currently out there in the network. The central bank interest rates are continuing to drop their rates. So that's going to increase the sales pressure of the price of Bitcoin to explode. The interesting news I've seen over this past week as well, it's just too much of a coincidence that a lot has happened during this week, which explains why we are seeing an explosive growth on the price of Bitcoin. So we've got Samson Mao here. He's in the middle, the chap in the middle here. He's actually been invited into the German Bundestag just to, continue this advocacy on nation states adopting Bitcoin. As we all know, Samson Mao, through his Jan3 company, their main remit is to sit with the political leaders out there in the world to start positioning Bitcoin in their own countries. I think the way he's soft landing this approach is through exploiting natural reserves, using the cheap energy resources that any country can have as an enabler to mine Bitcoin. And given the fact that Bitcoin, once you hold it in the national reserve, will increase price in time, which will then enable the governments to use those proceeds to fund their initiatives. So that's how he's positioning Bitcoin as one of the major reasons for countries to adopt Bitcoin in their nation state. So he's been invited to the Bundestag to give that similar explanation as to why Germany should certainly consider adopting Bitcoin. So that is positive, and this has been taken notice in the rest of the European Union countries as well. So interesting times ahead. And one final piece of news that also happened this week, as I said, it's been quite an eventful week. As you recall, the Bitcoin options, following the recent approval by the US Securities and Exchange Commission, where they've approved Bitcoin options on the IBIT, the actual BlackRock spot ETF, there's been some subsequent approvals on the other exchanges and indeed in the other spot Bitcoin ETF companies out there. You can see that the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, the Mini Trust, you got the Bitwise Bitcoin ETF, and so on. They've actually received approval by the US Securities Exchange Commission to be able to list and trade options on these Bitcoin trusts on the New York Stock Exchange. Also, the Chicago Board of Options Market have received similar approval to also list and trade their options on a handful of other US Bitcoin spot ETFs as well. So what are options? Let me explain that. The options are like derivatives. They allow investors to purchase or sell the Bitcoin underlying asset through the ETFs at a predetermined price on or before an agreed upon date. Now, this is important because this will bring tremendous amount of liquidity into the Bitcoin options markets, and I envisage this is going to be worth in the hundreds of billions, right, if not trillions worth of dollars of options trading happening over these underlying Bitcoin ETFs, which is where the option is going to sit on top of. If this is happening already now on a handful of the US spot Bitcoin ETFs, you can think about what's the ripple effect on the other remaining US spot Bitcoin ETFs in the other exchanges and other countries out there, right? There's many other countries who follow suit with the ETF's approval. So this options approval in the US is going to certainly have this ripple effect on the rest of the options market out there outside of the US. So this is significant news, and this would yet again add pressure on the sales price action for Bitcoin, right? Which would mean less amount of Bitcoin to be acquired in the remaining 21 million. As I said, it's hovering around 19.5. There's only 1.5 million left to be mined and to be purchased at a discount. Given these effects, I really strongly urge investors out there start allocating some now, right? Because when the US presidential elections conclude in the next couple of weeks or so, it's going to certainly have this God candle effect on its price action. It's going to skyrocket into the six-figure realm, and I would anticipate that happening by the end of this year alone. And then coming into 2025 and beyond, it's just a question of even more sales pressure out there, because we are seeing Bitcoin now truly embed into the global monetary mainstream. So hopefully you found this short episode interesting. And Bitcoin price is going to continue to rise, and these evidence has manifested that already. So if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit the like button, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel, as I regularly publish news and educational content on the latest of Bitcoin and blockchain technology, and particularly a personal passion of mine, which is real world assets tokenization. And I'll be seeing you next.